We are delighted that you're joining us for another podcast of Wake Up Aligned, and it is the podcast for chiropractors where we get to talk about chiropractic lifestyle, and topics of interest. You can contact us through our email, and that is mailbag@amcfamily.com.
Welcome back to another episode of Wake Up Aligned. It is good to be back. It's been a couple of episodes now since they've allowed me to sit in this chair and host a show with you, but hopefully you got something out of the last couple of episodes. I know they had, I believe it was Christy and Jan out of the CA coaching program, and I have not had an opportunity to listen to the shows, but if those two were talking, it was definitely worth listening to, and I would encourage you, if you've missed those shows, go back and take them in, because I can assure you folks, whether you're an AMC member or you're out there abroad, that you can have the most talented, most on-fire doctor, but if the staff, you have a mediocre staff that's not engaged, it doesn't matter how much you work, you're going to spin your wheels. But you can flip that around, have an on-fire staff that's focused and capable, and then a mediocre doctor that's half asleep at the wheel, and you can move the needle significantly. So folks, the staff is where it's at. You need to learn how to lead. You need to learn how to develop. And that's what that CA coaching program does for them. But anyway, I am glad to be back with you today. And I've got a special guest in the studio with us today. The one and only Dr. John Lay is going to join me. I don't think, John, I know you've been on the show before, but I think it was Dr. McMurtry was the host. So I think this is the first time you and I have been in the studio together. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so. And I think actually they just decided to cut that whole episode out last time too. So
well, you got to consider,
you got to consider the guest. I understand.
It wasn't you, Dr. Lay. It was McMurtry.
It was the interviewer, I'm sure. Yeah.
Oh, sure. I know that because you got good stuff to share. All right. Well, let's get going into the show. First of all, I want to point out, since this is my first time back on the show since, we're about, 3, maybe 4 weeks since the Orlando Summit. And folks, man, first of all, if you're not making it a commitment to your career, to your practice, to be at all 6 of the summits a year, my dad used to say, write FOOL on the butt of your hand and then stamp your forehead, because you're just missing out. But I just want to speak to these first 2 summits of 2024, that we are really onto something. You and I mean, Dr. John, you've been around for a few moons, right? A few minutes. And I don't know if we've ever seen that kind of impact and that kind of feedback that's coming out of these classes. And I'm specifically going to think about the Thursday afternoon class, because that's kind of new to the membership, that this year there's a really focused attempt to dive deeper into content that, in all honesty, we haven't had time to cover for years, right? Dr. John, you've been around long enough to remember, summits or boot camps, as we used to call them that way back then. They were 4-day events, right? Saturday, I think we would go Saturday through Tuesday afternoon. And over the time, it's just gotten whittled down to where we were down to Friday and Saturday. And then, let's be honest, members, you guys think it's okay to catch that early flight and you're leaving class at 1, 2, 3 o'clock. So we're trying to cram 4 days of some of the content, right? There's just a plethora of information. We got 4 days, and now we're down to really a day and a half. So the Thursday afternoons, we have specifically designed those to kind of go away from the segmented portions, and we're kind of diving into deep patient compliance and referrals. So that's what I want everybody on the show to hear. Thursday afternoon is going to stand for patient compliance and referrals. All the components, and there's a lot of it, And it'll probably take us, if I had to guess, doing it on a Thursday afternoon, it's probably going to take us 1.5 to 2 years to ever get through it. So I know you've been hearing feedback on it. So
Yeah, it's everything I've heard back from it has been positive. It's content in detail that, like you said, Tom, has been getting left out since the meetings have gotten shorter, and they're going into extreme detail. It's essentially taking one afternoon to do one section, but when people go back and they put that into play, 10 visit checklist from January, the reports I got were my 10 visit checklist, one has been more consistent, and two has been much more powerful since that. Same thing here with the patient compliance stuff that they list to on Thursday. It's incredible, really.
And then you go into what we've been doing in Depth and Genius. And we'll get off of this here in a minute, but it's just been really eye-opening for me. And I don't know how. I might take a survey right here on the show. Give us your feedback. I believe you can send it to mailbag at amcfamily.com. But provide us, suggestions, because what we're seeing in Depth and Genius, this very, very deep dive into your cornerstone, your fundamentals, like, for example, just these first 2 meetings. Think of that, folks. We've had a total of 4 days, Friday and Saturday, January, and now in Orlando. And we've just made it through consultation, exam, and first report. I was in there in the class with Dr. Osborne, Dr. Kriva, and Dr. Dalies in January, and I couldn't believe it. We spent 4 hours on the first 4 minutes of a consultation. And yet people came out of there going, first of all, they came out of there doing the best consultations they've ever done. And that we're talking to people that have been members for over a decade. So just the depth of that and what we realize that we can't do that every, I've thought about, well, do we do this every year? Like the first 3 summits that we just take a deep dive into your foundational pieces. I'm not so sure we could do that and keep the engagement. I'm not sure, but that's up for discussion, right? We can consider that. We've also had discussions just yesterday in our director meeting, Dr. Lay. We discussed, do we specialize and have a couple of meetings and add a couple of meetings to the 6 summits and be a total of 8, but 2 of those 8 would be just specifically 3 days of hammering those fundamentals like we've done here the first couple. And then I know that was also thrown on it that we would have many of them throughout the year and maybe host them in various certified training center offices around the country where small groups could get together and do it. But either way, folks, I know I've kind of got long-winded on that part of it, but just really powerful, and the results just keep piling up. I like to do these shows, and before we get into the topic of this show, I like to do shout outs, and there's no way that you can get to all of them. We were down there in Orlando, and Dr. Wilson and Dr. McMurtry, they had like 8 pages of front and back, almost like single space, honorable mention after honorable mention after honorable mention. Hundreds of offices are experiencing some of their best evers. So it's a really neat time for us to do what we do, right?
Yeah.
But I'm going to give my first shout out, and then I'll throw it to you and let you participate in the show, because so far it's just been the Tom Owen show. But my shout out goes to a young lady that came to January. I want everyone to hear that. She came to January. She heard about someone else's. So when we do these shout outs, it is motivating. She heard about Dr. Maureen Works. I believe it was 96%. It was either 95 or 96% acceptance ratio for the entire year of 2023. Now, let me just go ahead and tell you, that's a shout out in itself. So kudos to Dr. Work. But Dr. Work, you inspired Dr. Eileen Delacruz, and her whole team got focused on that, and they really hammered down on it. And I am happy to report now it's probably grown since then, because this has actually been a couple of weeks ago that I heard about this, and this is the first time I've been on the show since. But they had 32 out of the last 32 new patients accept care. And out of that, a great number of those were, I'll call them pay in fulls, but regardless, 32 out of the last 32. And that all came from them coming, hearing the inspiration at the summit, got inspired, got focused, and the team worked together. So that, just a shout out to Dr. Eileen. She's a rock star. Everybody knows her, and a rock star with a very sweet heart. So, all right. Do you have anybody that you'd like to add before we get into our subject of the day?
Yeah, but first I want to say about Dr. Eileen, I'm glad to see that she took that as a challenge to herself, as opposed to making an excuse and saying, well, she doesn't practice where I practice, kind of a thing. So I'm glad to hear that from her, but from her, you wouldn't expect anything less, right? I'm going to shout out Dr. Justin Anderson. Tom talked about the podcast with Christy and Jan. Dr. Anderson they have a good practice, he and his wife Kim, in Montana, but last year was a big struggle for them because they had staffing issues. And, things fell off. They struggled to find replacements. By the end of the year, they found somebody. First couple of months of this year, they are back up almost to where they were 2 years ago.
Wow.
This month, they actually had another staffing issue, but also took a week off for spring break and are still going to match what they did back in February. So they're rolling. Looks like they're going to be significantly above last year and close to matching 22. So
that's impressive.
Yeah.
And folks, those of you that don't know Doctors Kim and Justin Anderson, they've been around a minute as well.
Yeah.
And they have seen significant growth. So for you to say that they're hitting those kind of levels after those kind of challenges, it speaks volumes for them, but also for that CA coaching.
Yeah.
Because I doubt that would be happening without it.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Lay, the distinguished Dr. John Lay.
That's right.
What would you like to what rabbit hole would you like to go down and discuss today and give some direction, empower some chiropractors, inspire some chiropractors? Let's talk to them. What you got?
Well, I don't know, Tom, if you want to go down this rabbit hole or not, but I want to talk about what do chiropractors, what are you actually accomplishing in your offices? What do you have the potential to accomplish? Tom mentioned when we started this about the patient compliance that we're teaching on Thursday. And if your patients aren't compliant, you're not keeping your patients, for one thing, you'll never have an opportunity to affect their lives the way that we're going to be talking about today. And I want to talk about chronic diseases. And if any list that you look at, you will see an increase in chronic diseases over the last several decades in this country specifically. An increase in cancer rates, an increase in Alzheimer's or dementia, an increase in heart disease, an increase in diabetes. It goes on and on. And most of these chronic diseases are issues of lifestyle choice. And you can affect these in your offices. So that's kind of where I want to go today. As chiropractors, our first thing to do is we're going to detect a subluxation, we're going to correct it, and let the body begin to heal. And we should all know that coming out of school. Some schools, I think, aren't necessarily teaching it like that anymore, but that is what we're doing. And I'm going to ask you to try to use your imaginations right now and picture something for me. We've all seen the food pyramid, right? At the base has got the grains and then it moves it on up. So picture that pyramid, but erase everything out of the middle of it. And at the bottom of it, put spinal health or subluxation care, whatever you want to put there. And the next level up, put nutrition. The level above that, put gymnastics. And then above that, metabolic conditioning. This is how healthcare should be looked at in our offices. The first thing that patients get when they come in is they get checked for that subluxation and adjusted if needed. And they need to continually be checked because you don't fix a subluxation permanently. Life happens. If you do nothing, gravity's happening to you. But life happens, we get subluxated again. So we got to continually be checked on that. But there's another component in there. That next step up is nutrition. I don't know how many of you out there know this, but a lot of medical professionals now are starting to refer to Alzheimer's as type 3 diabetes. And if we know anything about type 2 diabetes, we know that that is a lifestyle choice for the most part, is the way people choose to eat, what they choose to eat, where they're getting that food from, how much processed food they eat, how much sugar they eat, all those kinds of things. And that kind of stuff can be affected in our offices. If we talk to our patients about how they eat, try to educate them on those things, we can start to affect that part of their health too. We're going to have a greater effect. Honestly, you get them eating healthier, their adjustments are going to hold longer in the long run, which is going to keep their bodies functioning better. And then you can take it a step further too, if you want. You can encourage your patients to go out and do some form of exercise. And I'm not talking about all of them going out and doing some high intensity interval training or CrossFit or something like that. Most of our patients that come in don't walk. Just get them out walking some. If all they can walk is 10 minutes, tell them to walk 5 minutes down the road and 5 minutes back home until we can do more. But if you can, these are 3 areas in our offices that we can easily address that can affect these patients' lives so much down the road, probably more than we will ever know, more than they will ever know, honestly. But if you can prevent some of these people from contracting diabetes, from getting cancer, from Alzheimer's, I mean, just how much is that worth to those people?
I think, and that is a good rabbit hole because there's 2 or 3 different ways that we could go. But I'm going to start with an example you just gave. You gave a visual to the listeners about that pyramid, right? And the foundation, the bottom line was spinal health.
Yeah.
But I think there might be a sub-level to that. And what we're dealing with, he's absolutely right. But what I want to discuss a little further is what everyone's idea of spinal health is. And I'm going to say a controversial word. Heck, you're already talking controversial stuff. You might get us banned talking about disease and chiropractic actually affecting that.
This isn't on YouTube, is it?
It will be. But anyway, but we have a controversy to get to before we can get to that controversy. And the one I'm thinking of is, folks, listen to me. It's the same in business. Your business, chiropractic, your practice, it all intermingles. You cannot build a skyscraper, a large pyramid, whatever you want to describe it as. You can't build it without a strong foundation. And the deeper the foundation is and the wider the foundation, the larger the structure that can be placed on it. And when you talk about that spinal health, I immediately, as you were talking, I was thinking, yeah, but the idea or the concepts of what spinal health is, or let's just get to what the philosophy of chiropractic is today compared to when you graduated, Dr. Lay.
Yeah.
Or I was talking to a doctor yesterday, came out and he graduated in 89. And then what about the philosophy of my dad?
Yeah.
BJ Palmer days, Clarence Gonstead days. The philosophy, and if I could say it, the foundation of chiropractic understanding has diminished. Weaker and weaker. We've got cracks in the foundation. And thus the reason you don't hear about what you're talking about. You don't hear about a lot of chiropractors thinking this way. They're so stuck in that musculoskeletal pain model. That's how, you said something early in the show. And when we got on this, you talked about the compliance factors. Wasn't too long ago. I'll just say a few years ago, I remember something kind of was nationwide, right? We woke up in the spring of 2020 and the world went nuts. And I thought everyone thought like me. And I quickly found out very few people think like me. But that wasn't what bothered me. What bothered me was how the people within the profession that I fight for is thinking. And I remember a president of a university, and I'm not going to name that university, but they specifically went out on a limb and did a big presentation and denounced anything about what you're talking about, said chiropractic cannot affect those type of conditions, or specifically health conditions, regardless of nutrition, exercise. That spinal health had nothing to do with it. Now that's the president. And what I do in my world is I work with a lot of students, as do you, right? These students are not coming out with any concept of what you think chiropractic is. So I think you have to expand on that a little bit, because number one, the philosophy's changed, and that is the foundation of anything that's going to be accomplished. And then back to that compliance factor. It's interesting because of the last 40 years of what I know, my side of, what I get to do in this profession is it's been 45 years, 47 years, right in that ballpark, since the sore throat report, since the plan to move us into the musculoskeletal box. And now all through the 80s, what was the national PVA average in the 80s? It was 6. What was it in the 90s? 6. 2000, right on up to today. So it doesn't matter the changes. It doesn't matter the ideals, the philosophies, the values, all that. We keep getting a 6-visit PVA national average. Now, granted, if you're a listener and you go, well, that's not me. My PVA's 22. Well, good for you. Is it as good? Is it what Dr. Osborne does? Is it 95? Lisa Bigley, people know her, runs about 75 to 80 PVA. My point being is compliance leads to the opportunity of what you're talking about. Because if we have how can anybody tell me what long-term chiropractic care and the benefits of it can be if we have 45 years or 40 years of a national average that you don't keep them long enough to find out what the benefits are? You follow me?
Yep.
So I'm all for it. Let's dive into what you were saying as you built the pyramid there. But I think the underlying problem or issue is the values of chiropractic. What does chiropractic, said the controversial word, subluxation?
Right.
I mean, who would have thought 40 years ago, 20 years ago, that the word subluxation would be a controversial word? You want to get me cursing on the show? Get me cursing on that. That is BS.
Yeah.
To think that there's not such a thing. I took my daughter, and I'll throw it back to you here in just a second. I went to the ER one time, with Michaela, my daughter, and she had an elbow. What's it called? Nurse's
Tennis elbow?
What's it called? I can't remember. But either way, dislocated elbow,
Oh,
right?
gosh. Yeah.
Something, right? And we go into the ER, and the diagnosis from the ER doctor comes out subluxated elbow. You can have a subluxated elbow. You could have a subluxated spinal process.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's just nonsense to think that that's not a thing. And then the evidence that shows of what benefits of chiropractic are for long term. So I'm going to throw it back to you here, but before the show wraps up, I want to talk a little bit more about compliance of things that you can lead to, because I want to be able to, in a show, I'd like to give, how can I increase my compliance? Where does compliance live? I'll unpack that, but I'm gonna throw it back to you. But the basis of that pyramid cracked.
It is cracked. Places it's more than cracked. It's crumbling, I think, in a lot of different schools around the country and what they're putting out, and even practicing docs that have gotten out and have just kind of succumbed to what the medical profession wants to think that we are. The president of the university, I'm gonna hope that all he was doing was lying because he was afraid to say what he believes. I don't know that that's a whole lot better, but at least it might be a little bit better. But on that pyramid, on that base, let's say that you change spinal health to brain-body connection. I don't think there's anybody in the world that would tell you that if you separate those two, you have no life. And if you have no life, there's nothing going on in your body. Yeah, you've cured chronic disease at that point, right? So they all agree that if you shut off the central nervous system, nothing happens anymore. That person's gone. The disagreement becomes, I guess, to what degree you can interfere with. And we know as chiropractors that any interference with that nervous system can affect wherever that nerve's going to. And it may not affect it today. It may not affect it tomorrow. It may be 15, 20 years down the road or so before you start to notice something going on. But it is an effect, and you can't deny that that's there. There's a guy that I follow on Facebook. A lot of you guys may follow him too. His name's Keith Wasson. He puts research out there all the time. And most of it is medical research that he's posting from medical journals, medical doctors talking about the effects of the nervous system on asthma, the effects of the nervous system on just about anything. And so to say that there's no research out there, that is just a lie, because there are tons of research articles out there.
How often have we have to nurture the doctor for 6 months to 12 months. They come to AMC meetings, and because of the big heart, big idea classes, they hang around with these chiropractors, and their light gets turned on. Many times we've got chiropractors, they have DC behind their name, but they actually get their chiropractic fire lit at AMC. So we didn't have to do that back in the day. They were all passionate. They understood who they were, and they knew what the value was. And so, it is what it is. But folks, if you don't understand it, then ask, right? What guys like Dr. Lay are for. Get Dr. Osborne on that soapbox. But what Dr. Lay is talking about is the building blocks of and realizing your overall value as a chiropractor. You're not just a muscular pain doc. And when you unlock that concept, you can't outgrow a concept. And if your concept is, I'm nothing more than a Band-Aid pain doc, then you're never going to experience miracles that take place through affecting, changing chronic process.
Yeah, I think, do you see yourself as the doctor or do you see yourself as an adjustment technician? And I think a lot of people are coming out of schools trying to go into practice nowadays that are adjustment technicians. I remember one of my first patients when I opened up, she came in, her and her kids, everybody started, her parents, and she told me I was going to be their primary healthcare physician for anything that happened. And that's actually when it really struck me as to the effect that we get. I knew everybody needed lifetime chiropractic care, but I really hadn't thought much past that. And then when she said that, then I was okay. I need to be the doctor, right? And that's what you people are. They look at you as their doctor, so be that.
I like to say a true chiropractor, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not just in name, that concept and that value. Do more for humanity in one day than most attorneys do in a lifetime. Not an attorney joke. Every time I say that, I'm not poking fun at attorneys. I'm just saying attorneys I've known and met, and I've known a lot of them, just know who you are. Know you as a chiropractor are impacting lives every time you. And then I promised before we wrap this show up that I was going to go back to compliance for a moment. Where does compliance live? Where does patient compliance start? Well, for those of you that have been at the first two summits, hung in there, stayed till the end. I'm proud of those that have been sticking it out and staying through Saturday evening. You have learned that patient compliance starts in consultation. And it lives and breathes in exam. And then it gets very strong first report. You jack up those three, you don't have to worry about the reported findings. You don't need to be talking about visit 15, 25, 40. Now, there are components back to your pyramid analogy that inside of AMC, where do you build on? Foundation is that consultation, especially consultation in first report. But there's compliance factors all through it. But if you have that week, it's going to be hard. But components that lead to patient, hate the name of it, but the 10 visit checklist lives and breathes. POC.
Yep.
So, John, you've been mentoring for years. You have an office that chooses to do a POC. What's the one thing that you know without a shadow of a doubt is going to get the office?
It's going to be compliance.
Compliance and referrals.
Yeah.
You're not going to have as many. Still will get some, but it will be diminished. Number of referrals. POC. I got one, and then I'll throw it back to you on any last minute words on this, your topic today. Wrap it up. But also I want to point out the weakness throughout, and this is everyone. I'm throwing everybody in the bucket here. The weakness of reeval and /X-ray or diagnostics. Major weak point. I promise that you don't get a 90 PA. You don't get a 70 PA. You don't get up there without reeval. Why is that? I just want to talk common sense. Why? Because folks can't do that. Nobody's wanting to learn the big chiropractic, big idea. Very few of them, right? They don't remember the original commitment. The further and further they get away from that CPR and that first initial commitment, better they're feeling, the less they remember. You have to do a reeval for no other reason. Now, there's clinical reasons to do it, but for no other reason but to remind them, do you remember where we started, why we started, what happens if we stop? You don't have that reeval built in every 10 visits, 12 visits, right in the ballpark. It gets to a point to where the x-rays, even if it's a spot shot, key is to keep reminding why. And if those of you that are AMC members, you feed off the need behind the need that we discovered way back in consultation. Remember in know how it was affecting your life. We don't want to go back there. So all of that leads back to, if I'm doing a good CER, if I'm doing a POC, I'm doing 10 visit, I'm doing reeval, re-x-rays, now all of a sudden I throw it back to you and say, wow, if I grew my PVA from 12 to 40, what might they see in the patient results?
Yeah, what they might see is, and let me pause right there for a second. If you don't have your new patients fill out a review of systems when they come in, I would start doing that. And every now and then when you do a re-exam, have them fill it out again. And a lot of times you'll see in there things that they've put down that were constant now are occasional or non-existent anymore. And you can bring their minds back to that, because that's another thing that they'll forget. I forgot that was an issue for me. And to help educate you and the patient on, this is more of a healthcare issue. But the longer you have a patient there, the more you can affect those chronic processes. And the cool thing about our profession, but also the frustrating thing at the same time, is we really never know how much we've affected the health of those patients that we have. Because that may be a patient that lives to 90 years old, never gets cancer, never has really a chronic disease, and they die peacefully in their sleep. But they were a lifetime chiropractic patient. So would they have developed any of those things? Who knows? But they had a better chance of that happening if they weren't a chiropractic patient. Let's go back. Let's say that you are giving people nutritional advice and you do a re-exam and they haven't progressed as much as you as the doc thought that they should. That gives you this goes back to patient compliance. Are you following the nutrition advice we gave you? No. Well, how are we going to get these results if you're not doing the things that you're supposed to do? And, I think our docs are afraid sometimes to have that conversation because they're afraid to lose a patient. And this may be a topic for another time, actually, but you can't live in fear of that, because this is not about your patient. This is about their health. You've got to take yourself out of this. And remember, this care is not for everybody, but it is for anybody. And think about that for a second. What that means is anybody can participate in this kind of healthcare and be far better off in the long run than anything they can get from medically. But not everybody wants to commit to it. And if you have somebody that don't want to commit to it, then that's on them. That's not on you.
That goes back to the expect the best.
Right.
Oh, no, excuse me. Recommend the best. What you're talking about here, Dr. Lay, is who's recommending the best.
Yeah.
Best components, the compliance, long-term, the effects. Recommend the best. Expect the best. Let the chips fall where they may.
Yep.
But who needs to reevaluate that this week? I think we need to wrap this show up. This has been good stuff. And brought up a couple other things that I think could be the shows all to themselves. We might record us another one here before we're done. But folks, I want to just wrap it up with this. Really great content today, but all of this wraps back to your identity. We've talked about a lot of different things. We talked about the disease. We talked about, are you a doctor? Are you just an adjuster? All that wraps up into identity. Never outgrow your identity, beliefs, values, purpose. What we're talking about today is, who are you? What are you? How do you identify as a chiropractor? If you increase the value of your identity, increase the value of your patient, effect to your patient. So just remember who you are this week. So we talk next time. I want you to think about that. You're one of about 38 to 40,000 practicing chiropractors. There's about 50,000 licensed, thereabouts, give or take. There's only about 38,000 that have any inkling, and think of what Dr. Lay and I have talked about, the vast majority of that 38,000 have cracks or crumbling foundations of their value and identity to what they bring. So if you can get tuned into this, think about that for a second. Who are you? Even if all 38,000 had the right identity, right values, the right purpose, there's about 350 million people in this country. You're only 31 of 38,000 that have any idea. Know who you are this week, and I hope you have found this episode to be inspiring, certainly empowering, and revealing. Open your eyes. Think differently about that. Dr. Lay, good stuff, man. I appreciate you joining me. And folks, with that, man, go make a difference this week. You are a whole lot more than a pain doctor. Start treating and acting accordingly. All right? With that, we love you, appreciate you. God bless.
See y'all.
Follow our show. You can share it with friends, of course. And we'd love for you to contact us at mailbag@amcfamily.com. In addition, you're always invited to attend or join us at a summit. Of course, registration is required. And we would love for you to check out the loads of free content we provide to social media every single week. Until next time.